Let's get started. Hi, Shekar. Welcome to the Big Unlock podcast, and it's really nice to have you on our show here. And this is our sixth season, and we have more than 150 episodes currently on the show, and good listening audience. So we're very happy to have you here, and looking forward to a lively discussion. I'll just introduce myself once again. My name is Ritu M. Oberoi, and I'm a managing partner here at Big Rio and Demo Consulting, and also a co-host of the Big Unlock podcast. And I'd like Rohit to say a few words, and then we'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
A short intro from my side, Shekhar, as well. I'm Rohit Mahajan. I'm the CEO and managing partner at Big Rio and Demo Consulting based in Boston, like I mentioned to you. Very happy to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to a great conversation with both of you guys. Shekar Ramanathan. I'm the executive director of digital transformation at Atlantic Health System. We're a 7-hospital, soon to be 8-hospital health system based out of New Jersey. 20,000 plus employees. About 500,000 patients in our ACO, fairly large organization, responsible for really kind of that the integration between kind of digital AI data, really how do we kind of drive technology to really kind of meet business and clinical problems. And we're really kind of focused on kind of how do you work outcomes backwards, really looking at, what do we really want to accomplish? What are the metrics that we want to achieve? And then how do we develop solutions really to kind of meet that need?
Great. So we all know that generative AI is the buzzword, and I just came out of attending, two conferences, HIMSS and then HumanX, which was completely AI and generative AI, and now the latest, Agentic AI. So we would love to hear your, views on these new technologies, and also a little bit about your AI maturity model at Atlantic Health, and where you feel you are as an organization in terms of AI maturity, and some of the initiatives that you've spearheaded or are currently in progress at your organization.
Sure. And so I don't think I've been at a conference or had a talk in the past 2 years that has not been around AI. and even if it starts with something else, it ends with AI.
Yes.
And it is definitely the kind of the hot topic no matter where you end up going. I think for us it's very much focused on the what are we still like. I think our strategy hasn't changed in terms of what we are trying to do from a digital perspective or from a organizational perspective. What we're really trying to do is see how do we align that with the new capabilities that are there. Really kind of focusing on continuing the same business strategy, which is always somewhat challenging because people keep coming, and it's like the question always ends up being, what is our AI strategy? I used to say that our AI strategy is our business strategy. It's not any different. I've somewhat changed that over the past past 2 years or so, where our AI strategy is really around building kind of the framework. It's enabling the business. It's understanding where the technology is going, so that we can really be in a position to fully leverage it. That's setting up the right governance. That's setting up the right processes to be able to monitor AI, to make sure that it's the right solution, it's the right cost. I think has been a challenge for a lot of organizations where you see a lot of people piloting a lot. And we started there too with plenty of pilots and everything else, but scalability becomes a challenge. And then finding the ability to really, who are the right people that are going to be able to use the tools? How are we going to be able to extract value and not get just excited by the art of the possible? We've done a lot of the things that a lot of health systems have kind of, focusing on things like the ambient voice, on, like note summarization, on, routing of messages and all of those kind of things. But we've also done some novel things where, we've kind of focused on things like, a virtual MA, where we can actually have more of kind of a quasi-agentic approach, not fully agentic, but kind of using some of those tools for like outreach, for patient communication, helping them kind of manage their care, but always having kind of that escalation to a clinician or a care provider wherever necessary. But we've seen a lot of success. At the same time, we are, we know that things are rapidly changing. I think that's been probably one of the biggest challenges. I think not only for us as an organization, but healthcare in general is kind of we're used to a fairly slow, process of just even selecting a vendor. Right. By the time you select a vendor, you sign a contract, you go through the motions of implementation, everything else. It is usually a pretty extensive timeline. Now, before
Yes.
you go through vendor selection, the next vendor is out that's doing it better. And it's like, how do you start changing to being truly more agile in thinking, solving problems smaller, focusing on kind of being more iterative and those kind of things has been some of our focus and challenge.
No, great answer there, Shekhar. And I was really, this is amazing that you mentioned the top three use cases, which are ambient, scribing, and message inboxing. So what has your experience been in terms of, you mentioned, going from pilot to scalability is like an issue. So in terms of like, you can pick and choose like any one of these initiatives and talk to us a little bit more about what the timeline was there and what the experience was like for you. And to give that some context, I heard this talk at HIMSS about innovation using Gen AI, and the very interesting takeaway from that session was that culture can both be an enabler and a barrier, because you have to be open-minded, you have to like you mentioned, be open to these new accelerated timelines, but at the same time, if there isn't buy-in from everybody in the organization, then people can be hesitant about change, and that makes it really hard to do the implementation. So would love to hear your thoughts about
Oh,
that.
absolutely. And I think one of the things is like I think people have a tendency to kind of pilot with a group of highly engaged, super excited folks who really want to kind of leverage the technology and,
Yes.
and, and they get excited, they do a lot of things, and then they look at kind of them scaling, and then it's like, okay, now we're just going to do this for the entire organization. And then they struggle to find the same level of adoption, utilization, and value. And I think where we've found a lot more success is when we find very narrow workflows, and it's a lot more focused on what it is that somebody wants to solve for. Really kind of making sure we're kind of solving those problems, and we have the bandwidth to do the education, to incorporate the technology and like especially a lot of like the generative AI stuff and those kind of things into someone's workflow, versus it kind of being just a tool that somebody is playing with,
Add on.
like because otherwise we see that initial adoption, where it's like a lot of utilization, everybody wants to try it, everybody is excited, it's like, hey,
Excited.
you know what, I can make this tool. I can write a song about COPD. It's like, hey, that's really neat. But at the same time, there's not a lot of practical use. And then when people start getting into, okay, you know what? Now I need to see patients. Now I have, I like this is an extension of my day. It becomes is this saving me time? Right? And do they understand how to write a good prompt? Do they understand how to find the information that they need? When is it useful? When is it not useful? We found a lot more benefit when we do that much more prescriptively, and saying, here's the use case, here's the prompt, here's the button to click to just
Yeah.
use the prompt that we've already created and we've verified and we know that is going to be effective, versus kind of just generically rolling out a tool. That also helps significantly on controlling cost, because a lot of these tools, as you scale, cost scales quite a bit as well. And it's kind
Yes.
of like, in the past, cloud was a challenge of trying to nail down kind of what is the true cost. AI takes that to a whole nother level. And so it's like we do want to kind of be able to really kind of control that rollout, make sure that we're touching people, making sure that they understand the benefit, and then really looking at scalability.
Okay, thank you. And next, we would like to talk about the role of a chief AI officer, and if Atlantic Health has a chief AI officer, and what do you think would be the pros and cons of, that role, and what are your viewpoints about that role?
So we don't have a chief AI officer per se. We have a lot of
Okay.
people who kind of wear
Chief AI
a
officer
chief
hat.
AI officer hat, me included. Where it's kind of what like my role is to still kind of drive what is our AI strategy with
Mhm.
that has a lot of different meaning to a lot of different people, right? And it's really kind of more of the how do we lay that infrastructure, right? So that we can support the different ideas and things that are coming. How do we identify what is really different between an AI project versus a digital project or a regular technology project? Like what are the things that we need to be thinking about differently? And then whether or not that's just a business use case or it's a clinical use case. And at that point, we need to make sure on the clinical end, we're bringing in the right stakeholders, right? We have the right clinicians. We're really understanding kind of the impacts of that and having the right processes around that. So it ends up being a group effort. I do see definitely kind of the role evolving. I think the question becomes, is that a purely dedicated role, or is that is that something that kind of ends up tying back to more of like on the data side, on the kind of digital transformation side? I think there's a lot of I think there's really kind of comes down to the organization, what kind of makes sense for them, and kind of the size and scale of their AI ambitions. I do think we're going to see a lot more chief AI officers, kind of coming about, especially as kind of the space grows, the opportunities grow, and there needs to be kind of more kind of process and control around it.
Yeah, what we've seen with other folks that we've been talking about is mainly that uh, the real need for the chief AI officer is around, like you said, strategy. Multiple people can wear those hats and do it, but the real need that they've felt is around governance, ethics, and maybe bias, and some of the other thorny problems that crop up. So have you had to face, would you like to talk about any challenges that you've had to face, primarily in terms of the AI implementation in terms of hallucination or bias or, data integrity, and how you overcame any of those challenges?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges is really understanding, what a lot of these vendors are doing, right? Because they're the pace in which kind of the innovation is happening, and kind of that challenge around kind of black box AI, right? I mean, that's the quote unquote vendor secret sauce, right? But at the same
Exactly.
time, like, are they really doing do they, are they doing something truly innovative? Are they actually getting results? How is that working? Do we know what data that they trained it on? The patients potentially, a in a rural area may be very different than in an urban area, or
Yeah.
like a patient population that is, they're only looking at adults and not pediatric patients, or there's so many different things that can kind of create bias. There's so many things that can make a model either work or not work for you. And how do you really evaluate that, right? And right now, a lot of these companies are coming, like, we're used to quite a bit of research, a lot of, it's like a lot of kind of documentation on how people are like the efficacy of a tool, the quality of kind of the outcomes from it. It's sometimes hard to get a lot of that information because people are, it's new shiny object, and people are getting excited about the art of the possible. And this is especially challenging for us on the kind of the operational end, when people are they're seeing a great idea, and they're getting promised a lot of results, that maybe they don't fully understand, right? It's, hey, this tool is 99% accurate, but at the same time, when you look at like the positive predictive rate, you're looking at the fact that 9 out of 10 times it's going to throw a false positive at you. And so
Yes.
it's like, that means you're now getting, 10 alerts for every one useful, alert. Is that really then? Yeah, it's 99% accurate, but because it shows up all the time. And it's how do we interpret that and make sure that the business is aware of kind of what the true experience will look like before we sign a contract, we implement something, and then kind of find that out on the back end.
Okay. Thank you. Rohit, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, Ritu, I'm very interested, Shekhar, about your journey in healthcare so far. The audience always likes to know, what got you started, what interests you, and what are you thinking about the future as well. So if you can share with us, what motivated you to take on this role and how you got into the healthcare industry segment and where are you headed, it would be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have always been in the healthcare technology space. I went to grad school for medical informatics back when nobody had any idea what that meant, and now it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like kind of everything's kind of coming together. I started more on the development and consulting end, kind of doing a lot with or like working with a number of kind of state governments and things to develop like syndromic surveillance systems and those kind of things. Did a lot of research around kind of patient experience, going through grad school. Ended up at Epic.
Nice.
Spent some time there. Definitely, got a lot of exposure to electronic health records. Kind of a lot of large health systems. Then spent a lot of time bouncing around a lot of large healthcare systems. Worked at the Bay Care Clinic, the Kettering Health Network, Wake Forest Baptist Health, and then eventually ended up here at Atlantic Health Systems. Have kind of been focused in that clinical application space, the digital transformation space, the generating of value from data, process optimization, everything else. And now I'm kind of at a point where it's like pulling all those different pieces
Yeah.
together, and really kind of being able to apply that. And really excited with the potential of AI at this point. Because I think I know I've been talking about and have been talked to about kind of the potential of where healthcare technology is going, what we're trying to do with EHRs, data collection, do all this stuff. We've been talking about this stuff for so long, right?
Yeah.
And what we've been doing is burdening our clinicians to document all this stuff with this hope of it's going to generate value, it's going to really kind of transform the way that we take care of patients. And I think we're finally at that precipice of where that is starting to happen because of a lot of the potential with AI. I think that's why people are getting so excited. People are getting so excited that they're kind of tripping over themselves,
Yeah.
trying to figure out the right solution. I'm definitely there in the excitement, but I also wanting to make sure that we do this right? Like we've kind of moved at a glacial pace, and now we kind of want to, we're ready to sprint, and it's how do we make sure we do this in kind of the being at like ethical about the things that we're doing, conscious about kind
Yeah.
of the outcomes that we're doing, all that kind of stuff as we go through this. But, super excited to be kind of here at this point and kind of all those kind of things from my background kind of coming together where really being able to kind of push things forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll add one more thing here, Shekhar. I think you're right. We are at the inflection point, and
Yeah.
definitely agree with you there. So there's a lot more changes coming very fast at us, and we have to adapt to those changes and adopt, technology which is useful. So
Sink or swim. Yeah.
yeah. And from a patient perspective, Shekhar, and you mentioned that the Atlantic Health System is in New Jersey. and you have 500,000 patients that you serve. So which is the geography in New Jersey, and are the patients population very diverse? And anything that you would like to talk with us about, on the patient engagement side of things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have a pretty like, so we're primarily based in New Jersey, kind of a little bit New York, Pennsylvania, but
Mhm.
primarily in New Jersey, heavily in kind of the northern central New Jersey
Mhm.
area. And we have 500,000 in the ACO, so we have a lot more patients overall.
Oh, I see.
But
I see.
yeah,
I
yeah.
misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, and it is a very different, I mean, like New Jersey is very diverse in general.
Yeah.
And some of that is like, when we start looking at things like health equity and, how do we outreach those different patients with also potentially kind of different like levels of digital affinity. And a lot of the patients that can most benefit from a lot of the digital tools actually end up being some of the ones that are probably the most challenged to get access to care to begin with. And so how do we make sure we're kind of thinking about that in the right way? How do we make it as easy and accessible as possible? There's a certain population that's going to be super excited that, hey, there's an app for that, and like all that kind of stuff. But the ones that are probably going to benefit the most are the ones that are maybe not thinking about, hey, do you have an app that I can utilize to manage my care? And how do we make sure that we are reaching out to those people, educating them,
Yeah.
and truly, enabling them to be a partner of their own care.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Back to you, Ritu.
Yeah, so I think we are almost at time. So, Shekhar, if you would like to have any closing remarks, I mean, I think this has been a very, engaging discussion. And we would love to hear your thoughts maybe on the next 3 future trends, what you think are coming with generative AI.
Yeah, no, I think the next big thing's going to be agentic AI, right? It's the next evolution as things become more and more quote unquote autonomous. I think we're going to see a lot of kind of a hybrid, of kind of a mix of, agentic, traditional, generative AI solutions. But I think a lot of this comes down to, how do we start removing a lot of kind of that burden of healthcare, right? I think we've spent a lot of time asking providers to do more and more, and I think where people are excited is that maybe like more of that can get offloaded, so clinicians can really focus on direct patient care, and a lot of those other things that may be more administrative or tangential. That's really where I think we're going to see a lot of technology that's going to be able to kind of help solve some of those problems.
Great. Thank you so much for being on our podcast, Shekhar. It was a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Rohit and Ritu, both for having me.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.